look, maybe not everything is going to be a banger. There are people who are divisive over the prequels, people who are even divisive over the original Star Wars, believe it or not. But I do believe we're going to get to a point where if Disney continues with more Star Wars projects, and if Jon Favreau is still in charge, there's hope. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Vince Salerno podcast. This is episode 86. As always, I'm your host, Vince Salerno, and today we are talking about something that is equal parts beloved and controversial. Star Wars. As you can see, I'm wearing a Mandalorian t-shirt. If you're listening on podcasting platforms, yeah. We're talking about Star Wars, and I am dressed for the event. Now, first, before we talk about Star Wars, I should make something clear. First off, I don't remember the last time I've even discussed Star Wars properly on the podcast. Actually, I'm going to look up on my podcast site where I upload and look at my episodes, see the last time I talked about it. Because I know I think last week on episode 85, I talked about the Rey movie being delayed and that movie just not shaping up to be something anybody is looking forward to. When did I properly talk about Star Wars? Let's see. Well, definitely, the closest thing that could be considered that is Indiana Jones, I suppose. I talked a lot about that last year. Let's see. Destruction of Hollywood, Scream. Yeah, I really don't think I've talked about it properly in a long time, which makes this episode in particular quite appropriate. And is also indicative of my feelings towards Star Wars, as much as I hate to say it. Yeah, even I'm looking as far back as 2020. I really didn't talk much about Star Wars. Maybe I talked about the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer when that came out. I know I did a video in 2019 covering some of the Mandalorian episodes in Season 2. Oh, gosh, yeah. It's been a while. It has been quite some time since I've properly talked about Star Wars, or at the very least dedicated a whole episode to Star Wars. And there's reason for that, of course. I, like many others, have been very disappointed with the way the franchise has turned out under Disney's leadership. But I do have to say, let's get one thing clear. I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars, and I still love Star Wars, and I will continue to love Star Wars. Just because its current state is less than amazing, less than what it used to be. I don't believe in the slogan "Star Wars is dead." You can't kill Star Wars. You can't kill what came before. You can't kill what it is at its essence. You can abuse it. You can mistreat it. You can create movies and TV shows that claim to be Star Wars and are really not, but you can't kill Star Wars. Star Wars is not dead. It is a franchise that is being mismanaged and abused, as I said, but not dead. My love for Star Wars started, I gotta say, maybe when I was 5 years old. I remember my dad sitting me and my brother down to watch the movies. I think my sisters and my mom were out and about. And my dad had taped from TV back when you used to record movies as they premiered on TV or as they were streamed on TV. I don't even know if you call it streamed or whatever. But he taped them off TV and had them on a VHS. He had like a 3-hour VHS, or maybe it was like 4 hours or something, with The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And that was my introduction to Star Wars. And I didn't know that that was only two parts of a trilogy. I didn't even know what a trilogy was at that time. But I just knew, I had a general idea of what Star Wars was. My brother and I, we had Lego sets. I remember growing up with a very, compared to today's standards of Legos, very crude looking Boba Fett Slave One ship and Luke's Landspeeder from A New Hope. And I was actually kind of confused when that Landspeeder never showed up in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. And then it came with the Luke Skywalker and an Obi-Wan Kenobi minifigure, and I was surprised that Obi-Wan was a ghost in Empire and Return of the Jedi. And so I was like, I must be missing something. And then it wasn't until a couple years later that my brother and I, we got A New Hope, the special edition, on VHS at a Goodwill somewhere. And we got to see the very first Star Wars. And that has, I think ever since then, and to this day, that remains my favorite Star Wars movie. I know that, like, Empire Strikes Back is, like, considered the best Star Wars movie objectively, and I agree. Like, as far as sequels, as far as revolutionizing storytelling, kind of creating not just franchise storytelling, not just how to do a sequel that is in the spirit of the original movie, but very different and very challenging for the characters, but also creating like the trilogy, a trilogy. And I don't think any franchise had attempted to do a trilogy, or any type of movie series had attempted to do a trilogy like that before, a three-part story. Because everybody, I mean, everybody, if you're in franchise filmmaking, franchise Hollywood and all that, Star Wars is the gold standard. If you can get something that is as successful as Star Wars, you've hit the jackpot, essentially. And the thing that's probably come closest is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And maybe before that, Harry Potter, the Harry Potter franchise, which I'm not particularly a huge fan of, but I respect it for its cultural significance. Those are the things that kind of come to mind as far as what has been able to emulate that same success that Star Wars had. So, yeah, and it's incredibly influential as a filmmaker. I remember my copy, it was a special edition again. I never got to see the original Star Wars. Or no, I did actually. I had a friend who somehow got the original theatrical Star Wars on DVD. I think he had to go through some bootleg company to get it. But when we saw that special edition version of A New Hope, it was accompanied at the beginning with this 10-20 minute featurette of the making of Star Wars, the original Star Wars, and the restoration process of the special editions of the movie. And it was particularly focusing on A New Hope. And, you know, before the controversy of before I knew of the controversy, because I was a kid at this time, I wasn't really enamored or interested in the controversy, or knew about the controversy, really, of George Lucas tampering with his old work. I was just enamored by, like, the filmmaking process and what he was doing to create this world, to add elements in via CGI and special effects, and seeing footage of, like, them building parts of the Death Star and then driving by in their trucks as they blow up sections to get shots of, like, the X-Wings crashing into the Death Star at the climax of the movie. And I was just enamored by that. Same way how I've told the story 100 times by now. The story of how I saw Toy Story on VHS, and at the end it was accompanied by that featurette of the making of Toy Story, and that woke me up to the idea that, wow, you can get paid to make movies. That's amazing. Sorry, I got a text on my phone. Nothing. It's no big deal. So yeah, my love for Star Wars has been ingrained ever since I was a kid. Not just inspired by that world as a filmmaker and falling in love with those characters, but also, you know, playing with the action figures with my brother. Very fun, intimate memories of playing with those toys with my brother. We had a lot of we had a lot of characters from Revenge of the Sith. That was the one that we were kind of most conscious of, and we would get these. They had these compendiums in the library of that would catalog all the Star Wars action figures, and these were like the 3¼ inch action figures that were synonymous with Star Wars toys, and have kind of lost their relevance as the Black Series has taken over, which I'm a huge fan of. I occasionally will collect Black Series to this day. Not as much anymore as they continue to make less and less movies and shows that are relevant to me, but I still keep my eye out for things, and my collection's pretty much set where it's at. I'll put up a picture if I can get one. The only thing I don't have is an R2-D2, which for Black Series fans, it's like impossible to find an R2-D2, and if you can, it's hard to not pay north of $50 or up for a R2-D2 Black Series figure. It's ridiculous, but it's a tribute to how important of a character R2-D2 is. So all this to say, I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars. I'm always going to continue to love Star Wars. A couple of bad shows, a couple of bad movies, a horrible mismanagement under Kathleen Kennedy is not ever going to change how I feel about Star Wars. In the same way that how Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny did not change my opinion on how I feel about Indiana Jones. Because both mean a lot to me, just as far as my upbringing and inspiring me to be a filmmaker, and as far as what's possible with serialized storytelling with multiple characters and seeing characters go on a journey and stuff like that. Love those movies. It's safe to say Lucasfilm has been integral to my upbringing as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, and as just a lover of stories, as I'm sure many people can say that. I don't take claim to that at all. But it's a tribute to just how wonderful those movies are, and why so many people are upset with the state of Lucasfilm, the state of both the Indiana Jones and, more importantly, the Star Wars franchise. So, yeah. All that's to say, my love for Star Wars will never fade. So now I'd like to go through, we're going to kind of go through, so I've shared my thoughts on Star Wars, where I'm at, where I have been, where I've come with Star Wars. But now I'd like to go through everything that Disney has done, and I'm going to give just a very brief overview of my thoughts on each of these projects that have come out under Disney, if I've even seen them. I mean, if I haven't seen them, I'm not really going to comment much on them, because there are some projects that I have avoided like the plague. And then we're going to get into the, as I said on Twitter, we're going to talk about the Hollywood Reporter article that came out about is Disney bad at Star Wars? Which is just a very interesting claim. It's a very interesting thing to ask, because I think the answer is quite obvious, but I think the article takes a somewhat neutral approach. Anyways, we'll get into that later. But let's I have a list here. So here we are on the official Star Wars website. They have a Star Wars movies and series viewing guide. If you're looking to jump into Star Wars for the first time, or you're a longtime fan catching up with the latest releases, have no fear. StarWars.com is here to rescue you. Check out the two lists below: release order and chronology order of every Star Wars movie and series, including live action and animation, to help you on your Star Wars journey. Well, that's helpful. Thank you, Lucasfilm, or StarWars.com, whatever. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go through the release order. So obviously we have the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, Clone Wars movies, Clone Wars series. So Rebels is where the Disney regime started. So let's just go from there, and then we'll go down to the very bottom, which I have some thoughts on the one at the bottom. Let's just say that. Okay. Star Wars Rebels. I have seen Star Wars Rebels from beginning to end. It actually took me almost 2 or 3 years to get through it, just because I was watching it. Not really like sitting down to watch the whole thing from beginning to end. And you know, I think I was just starting to date my girlfriend, now wife, at that time, and she likes Star Wars. She's not like a big Star Wars fan, so it was never something that I think I was able to get her to sit down and watch. So I had to do it on my own time. And typically, when you're dating somebody, you prioritize things you both can watch, you both can get into. So it took me a long time to get through the Rebels, but I did get through it last year because I was trying to finish it for Ahsoka, because I was one of the few people who was actually looking forward to Ahsoka, which I'll get into in a second. But I like Rebels a lot. I like the characters of Kanan, Ezra, Sabine, like that whole crew. I think they're really cool characters. Very much emulates the family dynamic of Star Wars. And the feelings people had with Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, R2, 3PO, and Lando as them being like their own group. I think Rebels emulates that really well. And it's also cool to see a Jedi Padawan relationship in a post prequel era and then leading up to the very first Star Wars movie. So I think that was really cool to see, and the way Filoni played with lore and incorporated characters from the Clone Wars and the prequels into this in-between period through animation. It was really well done, surprisingly really well done. The first two seasons are a little kiddish, but once you get to season 3 and 4, I think it really the show matures itself quite a bit. So if you're into animation, even if you're not, I mean, I would highly recommend checking out Rebels. And all of that, of course, if you're a fan of Rebels, Ahsoka is essentially Rebels season 5, more or less, or it's more of a getting the band back together, which is I'm not going to get into the details. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, next is Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, which came out December 18th, 2015. Wow, next year it'll be 10 years old. That's crazy. That is absolutely insane. I actually really like The Force Awakens. If you think about the time that it came out, it was exactly what the franchise needed. It needed something that was going to unite the fans who were maybe a little turned off from the prequels, and fans who wanted to get back to what Star Wars felt like with those original 3 films. I think, for all intents and purposes, I think it did its job. There are definitely some issues. There are some story directions that I don't necessarily agree with, and in hindsight, knowing where we went with that story, I would not have been on board with that. But for what it is, I think it's definitely the best of the sequel films. It's the one that I would happily rewatch again. It's actually one of the 2 that I own on physical media. And honestly, like looking back at that time in 2015, to have Star Wars resurrected into the cultural zeitgeist and be a Star Wars fan again, it was a really magical time. I got to be honest with you. I remember going to my local Toys R Us and Target for the unveiling of Star Wars, the Star Wars toys in the theaters. I think once with my brother, and then I think I went again like a week after more products had been released with my friends in college. And we got like this, I think I still have it in the package. We got this like commemorative Lego piece with a First Order clone trooper on it. And it said Star Wars on it. It was like a little Lego brick. We didn't buy anything, but we just got to look at the toys, and I was going to, because I wanted to see what clues were there, and also I wanted to start my Black Series collection, which I did. My very first Black Series action figure was Finn from The Force Awakens, and sadly I had to sell him because I just don't have that sentimental connection to the sequel trilogy anymore like I used to. Maybe he's a dime a dozen, unfortunately, so maybe I'll pick a Finn figure up in the wild if I see it, and I'll re-add it to my collection, because of all the characters in the sequel films, outside of maybe Kylo Ren, I think he was one of the most interesting and had the most potential. But my collection mostly consists of just prequel and original trilogy characters. But anyways, all that's to say, I like The Force Awakens a lot. I think the anticipation for the film was just as fun, if not more fun, than the movie itself. After that was Rogue One, a Star Wars story in 2016. You know, I don't like the a Star Wars story tagline they use with those anthology films because when they announced these new films at Star Wars Celebration, the tagline they used was Star Wars Anthology, which I thought was so much cooler than a Star Wars story. I hate it, and I hate what it's done to the industry because now you have other franchises doing that thing, like Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, from the world of John Wick, Ballerina, is I think the title for that recent Ballerina movie, the first trailer for that came out. I hate that people have leached onto that because it's a horrible tagline, I think. It's a horrible subtitle. I think Star Wars Anthology would have been much more epic, but as we've seen, Lucasfilm was not necessarily in the market of making good decisions. But I think Rogue One is a film that has gotten better over time. I think a lot of people were critical of it. And it still has its issues. It's not the most tightly knitted film, but I think if you watch it with A New Hope back to back, I think it is a much better experience as a prequel to A New Hope. I don't think it works as a film on its own per se. But again, like as a prequel to the original Star Wars, it's very cool and it's very fun. And that final act is one of the most fun things that Disney Star Wars has done. And unfortunately, that's probably as good as it got with those first two movies, because next up was 2017 with The Last Jedi, Episode 8. In my opinion, the worst Star Wars movie ever made, subjectively. Now, I have to be honest with you guys. When this movie first came out, I was praising it. I thought, oh man, like it's nuanced, it's different, it's about like the whole point of the movie was that Luke was wrong, and I was saying things that like I really truly in my heart didn't agree with, but I was trying to love this movie because for me not loving a Star Wars movie was just like a foreign thing to me. I didn't want to not love a Star Wars movie. And my best friend, props to him for really challenging me. We debated it like for a whole night, and eventually like his argument stuck with me, and I really started to think about it, and I thought, oh man, he's right. This movie sucks. And having seen it subsequent times since my first time, I remember seeing it 3 times in the theater, and having seen it subsequent times after that, and getting off the high of having finally seen Luke Skywalker with a lightsaber and all of the cool imagery that is in The Last Jedi. I will admit there's some cool imagery and some action in there. It's not a good movie. It's a very nihilistic movie, and Star Wars is not nihilistic. It destroys Luke Skywalker and robs fans of what they've wanted to see from this character for years. Ever since it was even possible, or it was even fathomed that Mark Hamill could return as Luke Skywalker one day, or there'd be more stories to tell post Return of the Jedi. People had this image of this fully formed Luke Skywalker who was confident in his ways, had defeated the Empire, and could train a new generation of Jedi, and that whole version of Luke was thrown away by this really sad, pathetic, nihilistic, borderline suicidal, depressed version of Luke Skywalker that only served to prop up Rey, which, albeit to Rey's credit in those movies, at least she was a fan of Luke Skywalker and she believed in him. But when it came down to it, she really didn't learn anything from him. She didn't really grow in any way in the movie, which is also one of the flaws. Like, none of the characters really go anywhere. Rey becomes solidified in the fact that she's a nobody, which is supposed to be like anybody can be special, doesn't matter, you don't have to be a Skywalker, which I think is stupid because people want to see these familial connections, and not having Rey be, at the very least, a Skywalker or and it's not even the fact that she has to be. I mean, I think yeah, the familial connections are important, and I think trying to have some sort of message that you can anybody can be a Jedi, anybody can be special. I think it's admirable, but the mystery and the lineage is important. People want to see Luke's offspring carry this franchise. That is what was robbed by for most people. That's what we were robbed of as fans. And again, it also quickly diminished characters like Poe and Finn to being less significant. Poe had a really good arc about becoming a leader and kind of succeeding Leia as the leader of the Resistance, which I thought was good. But then Finn, he had nothing, to the point where they almost killed him. And at that point, it would have been better if they just killed him, because the poor guy had nothing to do in those movies. And I mean, don't get me started on Rose Tico. Like, Kelly Marie Tran was set up for failure. The way they made her costume, the way they wrote her character, just everything. There's just so... I could go on and on about my issues with The Last Jedi. And just its refusal to embrace Star Wars fans and give them something that they'll actually enjoy, but forcing them to deny the things that they want to see in favor of this, I don't know, nihilistic, mature Star Wars movie. And for people who say that it is anything like Empire, it's a laughable statement. Anyways, I should probably move on from The Last Jedi and move on to Solo, a Star Wars story, which came out in 2018. I like Solo. It's an okay movie. I think Alden Ehrenreich's a great actor. I thought he was great as Han Solo. There were definitely some high moments, but I think it is a mostly inconsistent movie. Tonally, it's all over the place. I think there are some really sincere, heartfelt moments, and there are some really weird, wacky moments, which is, albeit very Star Wars, but if it was done in a less, I don't know, in a more consistent way. It doesn't help that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller directed half the movie, and then they were fired. And then Ron Howard was brought in to finish the movie, and albeit I heard that was to make it closer to Lawrence Kasdan's original script, which Lord Miller were veering away from. But I love Lawrence Kasdan, and I would have loved to have seen his full, complete vision. That being said, I would have also liked to see Lord and Miller's version of Solo as well. Both will probably never see, unfortunately, unless it's an act of God. It was the movie that canceled any spin-off films, and we did away with the Star Wars story moniker. Thankfully. And also, it was the second to last Star Wars movie to come out in the past almost 10 years, which is sad to think about. After that was Star Wars Resistance, which I believe is a prequel series, an animated series to The Force Awakens. I've never seen it. I don't intend to. I don't have an opinion on it, really. I'm not going to comment on its quality. I just have no interest in seeing it. And then, of course, 2019, we got a 1-2 punch with the phenomenal The Mandalorian. My favorite Star Wars show. Probably the thing that has closely emulated George Lucas's vision, style, and tone of the original Star Wars series, the original Star Wars trilogy, excuse me. And also adding its own elements and influences. It's very Good, the Bad, and the Ugly inspired. It's more of a Western style show than anything, and I love that, being a huge fan of Westerns. And then how that show ended up being a bridge to what is hopefully will be remembered as a renaissance for Star Wars. I know it's been imperfect, but it has been what will hopefully be remembered as the thing that saves Star Wars. And so, yes, we had 2019, the first season of The Mandalorian, followed by The Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars Episode 9, which I will honestly, and with no shame, admit is a much better film than The Last Jedi, only because J.J. Abrams spends as much time as he's allotted apologizing for The Last Jedi. Say what you want about the quality of The Rise of Skywalker. I thoroughly enjoyed whenever it's apologizing for that movie. I'm not saying it's a good movie per se, but it's far more entertaining and far more fascinating, its concepts, um, than anything The Last Jedi introduced. And I think in isolation, a lot of the concepts introduced in The Rise of Skywalker could have worked if they had been part of a previous film to flesh these things out. It felt like Rise of Skywalker was trying to almost redo and retcon episode 8 while also doing episode 9, in addition to being a trilogy ender, in addition to being the Star Wars or the Skywalker saga ender, in addition to being this thing that combines past, present, and future, and essentially ends the main story of Star Wars, and it did not do that at all. It was very obviously disjointed, haphazard, fast-paced mess of a movie. And I remember I had high anxiety because I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I'll say it. I had this like obsession that like I needed Star Wars to be good, and that's part of what fueled my arguments with The Last Jedi. I needed there to be not a bad Star Wars. Like, I don't know if I could have handled a bad Star Wars movie, and I learned to accept and embrace the fact that the franchise, I think that was the first time I kind of fully admitted, okay, the franchise is broken because this is not a good movie. And I can't, in my heart, I cannot admit that it's a good movie. I enjoyed it, and this is actually the second of the 3 movies that I own on physical media. I don't know if I'll ever buy The Last Jedi. If I find it at Goodwill or something, maybe I'll pick it up. But I'm content with owning The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. Again, because it's at least entertaining. It's exciting to see as a Star Wars fan. There's a lot of fan service. And guilty as charged, I like watching it. It's fun. It's a fun watch. But I know it's a bad movie. And it's an embarrassing failure. Especially when you consider the box office of these 3 sequel films. The first movie made over $2 billion, the second movie made over $1 billion, and the third movie made $1 billion. And that's not the type of numbers you want to see with a trilogy that's supposed to resurrect Star Wars in the zeitgeist. And then in 2020, I believe we got The Mandalorian Season 2, which gave us one of the greatest Star Wars TV episodes of all time. The finale, where we got to see the glorious, triumphant return of Luke Skywalker in his Return of the Jedi form, far removed from anything The Last Jedi did to assassinate his character. It was a glorious, uniting moment, and it gave me hope that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were going to save Star Wars. And then, of course, this was not known by Kathleen Kennedy that Luke Skywalker was going to be in the finale because she hates Luke Skywalker, as many fans have theorized and probably accurately guessed. And then we were followed up with the Book of Boba Fett, which showed just how hard Kathleen Kennedy was going to make Jon Favreau's life. The Book of Boba Fett was reportedly interfered with by Kathleen Kennedy because he was stretched between helping out with Ahsoka and the Book of Boba Fett. And while he was away on Ahsoka, she would intervene and add things and approve things that just messed up the story, were not what Favreau and Filoni had intended for that show. And allegedly, we can't confirm these things, so take it with a grain of salt. But I tend to believe this, just given Kennedy's track record, her hatred of Luke Skywalker, and her ignorance in admitting that what she is doing is not working. That show featured some more moments from Luke Skywalker, some of the best moments from Luke Skywalker in this new era of Star Wars. some great moments. I don't think Book of Boba Fett's a horrible show. I think it definitely has some promise. I was hoping it would be like the Godfather of Star Wars, and it unfortunately wasn't. But I hope that's not the last time we see Boba Fett, because I don't want the takeaway to be that we don't want to see Boba Fett again. I think he needs a bit of a facelift as far as his character, because he was also um, his portrayal in that show, which is not Tamora Morrison's fault at all. The way he was written was just a it was almost an opposite of who the character is. 2021 also gave us The Bad Batch, which I've never seen. I don't really intend to, just because I don't have an interest. I'm sure it's good. I've heard a lot of good things about it. It's just not really on my radar. Followed by Obi-Wan Kenobi in 2022, which was a good, no, not good, a disappointing show. Let me say that. Everything that you want to see in that show happens in the very last episode. I will give it this. They make Obi-Wan a sort of washed up failure who is living with regret about what happened in Revenge of the Sith, which is a much better look for Obi-Wan than it is for Luke in The Last Jedi. But I can't even. I mean, Reva, poorly written character. The whole show was just a mess. And if you've seen Star Wars Theory's interview with the original writer of the planned Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy, his vision for that sounds incredible, and I really wish that was what we had gotten, because it felt like it would have been more in line with what would have made sense for the character. Andor. So I have not seen Andor. I initially heard claims of wokeness, which a lot of these bad Star Wars projects are guilty of. I've initially heard claims of wokeness to Andor, and I just avoided it. But I've heard from a lot of close friends of mine, a lot of people who I trust and like, that Andor is actually pretty good. So I do plan to watch Andor. I don't know if I'll watch it in time for season 2 to come out, but I do plan to watch the show. I just don't know when. Tales of the Jedi, haven't seen. I do like the Clone Wars, but I just don't really have an interest. Ahsoka. Ahsoka. I have seen Ahsoka. I really like Ahsoka. I know it's a little controversial. A lot of people didn't like Ahsoka, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best shows we've gotten in a long time. And as far as the lore, as far as acknowledging things people want to see, Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen, tapping into the Force, and the way it continues the Rebel story. There are certain things I didn't like with like how they characterized Sabine, her getting impaled in a hilarious way and not dying. Qui-Gon suffered the same injury, and he did. Just some really questionable, bad, cringy moves. There is kind of a girl boss feminist slant. It's not too severe. It's not too in your face at times. But I really enjoyed the show. I think it's the best thing we've gotten in a long time for Star Wars, especially after Mandalorian Season 3, which came out at some point in 2022, I think, was a major disappointment. Absolutely, just, it felt like a hollow shell of what it used to be. And prioritizing Bo-Katan, who's a fine character, but prioritizing her over Mando to be the central character is just a horrible choice. And then last but not least, we have Tales of the Empire. Again, haven't seen it, don't intend to. No, nothing against it. I'm sure it's fine. And then The Acolyte, which I have no intention of ever watching. Maybe just out of mere curiosity. But The Acolyte sounds like the most... It sounds like the worst out of all these woke Star Wars projects we've gotten. It sounds like the most anti-Star Wars thing I've ever heard of. I watched a lot of the reporting and a lot of the spoilers and stuff about the show, and it just sounds really bad. I don't want to see it. Don't intend to see it. Um, so that's where we're at. We got the first movie in almost 10 years. No, excuse me. I'm sorry, not 10 years. The first movie in almost a decade. Yeah. Coming out in 2026, The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is rumored to be basically season 4 of the Mandalorian and potentially wrap up Grogu and Mando's main story. They'll still be featured in Star Wars, just not as the main characters. Zeb is confirmed to be in the film, who was from Rebels. There's rumors that Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Leia are going to show up. There's rumors that Thrawn is going to be the main villain now that he's back in the universe. A lot of cool things that are happening. Of course, the great Jon Favreau is directing. So yeah, a lot of promise with that. And then we have Skeleton Crew coming out later this year, which I've heard mildly good things about. I'm excited. I don't like suburban town, like the suburban town that we see in that trailer. I think that's a little too close to reality. It's definitely not something that fits within the universe, so I didn't like that. But the idea of a bunch of kids getting lost and a kind of a Spielbergian style Star Wars adventure series alongside a Jedi, a kind, lonely Jedi who is going to help them, which I believe is Jude Law's character. I like it. I think in concept, I really like it. So I'm going to try to check it out this year as it premieres. And I'm sure you'll hear something about it on the podcast if I do. Which brings us to the article that we're going to check out. So let's check out this Star Wars article. Let me see if I can pull it up. Here is the article from The Hollywood Reporter. This was released on Thursday, I believe. As you can see, we've got various Disney Star Wars projects. We got Rey from The Rise of Skywalker, Mando from Season 2, I believe, and Amanda Stilberg. I'm sorry, I forgot her name. The girl from The Acolyte. Is Disney bad at Star Wars? An analysis. I breezed over this article when it came out, so I kind of know where this goes. So I wanted to read it in advance so I don't have to read the whole thing. It is a long article. We're going to go through this like we did last week with the Inside Out article. We're going to break it down, and we're going to talk about the Hollywood Reporters, and specifically James Hibbard's take on, his take on, is Disney, oh my gosh, what is happening? Is Disney Star Wars bad, or is Disney bad at Star Wars? High budgets, scrapped projects, fan backlash. It's been 12 years since Disney bought Star Wars, and it's a galaxy far, far away, arguably. And its galaxy far, far away arguably has too many broken toys. It's the understatement of the year. There is an exchange in Star Wars The Force Awakens when Rey and Finn are fleeing from stormtroopers and searching for a way to escape. Rey spots the legendary Millennium Falcon, declares it looks like garbage, and then quickly reconsiders. The garbage will do. That was a funny moment, I have to admit. Increasingly, that's the attitude some fans have about Disney's Star Wars programming. Look, we all know this isn't fantastic anymore, but Star Wars is still Star Wars, and therefore it will do. I don't know who said that, but I guess I can agree with that. Like, Star Wars is still Star Wars. You don't have to love everything that comes out, but doesn't mean you have to just sit and take the crap they give us. To be fair, Disney Star Wars shows and movies remain far from space junk. Their titles typically get glowing reviews from critics and generate box office returns and streaming ratings that other studios would envy, though at a high cost. Okay, in this article will admit to the numbers of the sequel trilogy specifically, but critical response is losing its charm these days. Like, it does not matter what the critics say anymore. What matters is what the audience will enjoy. In fact, I'd say props to Rotten Tomatoes for putting more investment into the audience reception of projects by giving, like, the certified fresh popcorn rating, whatever it is, because that's the direction I think we're taking. The power has to go back to the fans. It doesn't matter how good these shows are from a critical standpoint. And I'm not poo-pooing critics. I know a lot of good critics, but like, people don't trust the critics anymore. People will not go to a movie based on critical reception, professional critical reception. They will go if the audience responds in kind. So box office returns, yes, that is a proven moniker for success, but Star Wars hasn't had a good movie, or a movie in theaters, in a long time, so that statement doesn't really hold much water. It raises a question. Is Disney kind of bad at Star Wars? Or is this a case where a very high bar for success combined with passionate fans' gripes tend to obscure what is otherwise a hugely popular and lucrative franchise? Let's take a closer look. Your job is to appease fans, so I don't like how this article sort of demonizes fan gripes. Your job when you are dealing with a brand that fans adore is to please them. If you can't do that, you have no business making a Star Wars movie. You have no business owning the rights to Star Wars. Anyways, the films, let the past die. Kill it if you have to. After buying Lucasfilm from George Lucas in 2012, Disney relaunched Star Wars as a franchise trilogy in 2015 with director J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens. Film was an absolute blockbuster, yet surprisingly, and it turns out problematically, the studio did not have a firm creative plan for the next two films, at least not one that was followed. Rian Johnson's 2017 sequel, The Last Jedi, took the story in a different direction that many loved and many didn't. I have not met very many fans that have loved The Last Jedi. Then Abrams returned with The Rise of Skywalker and tried to push the narrative closer to his original intentions. Comedians learn in improv class to always say yes, and to any idea introduced during a show, no matter idea introduced during a show, no matter how challenging. Okay, that was a weird read. The studio and Abrams' reaction to The Last Jedi was more like, no, actually, Rey is nobody, but she is a Palpatine. The result was a trilogy that's a mismatch of dueling creative visions. Lucas took a similar, I'm making this up as I go approach to his originals trilogy, but it was far easier to maintain a saga's cohesion when all the films are led by the same person. Okay, I agree with that. When I first read that, I thought, okay, what is this person saying? Like, Lucas did not have a make it up as he went approach to the trilogy, but he admits that it's true. Like, he had an idea of where the story was going to go, but he didn't have a concrete plan. I don't think Luke and Leia being siblings was a thing until after Empire came out. But yes, it is much easier to deliver on something where there is a consistent vision and one person is steering the ship. I'm not saying the same person had to direct all the films, but there should have been a writer who had written all three scripts. And then that was the plan. Disney said, stick to this or die. Basically is how I feel about that. At a time when Disney's Marvel movies kept breaking new ticket sales, The Force Awakens made an extraordinary $2 billion worldwide. Jedi, okay, as I said, they get into the numbers. Last Jedi, $1.3 billion. Skywalker made $1 billion. It's still $1 billion, but these are incredible numbers for any film, but they were going in the wrong direction. When the third entry of your trilogy launches, a new franchise sells half as many tickets as the first, you probably made the wrong turn somewhere. Around the same time, the studio experimented with two standalone titles. Rogue One, which earned $1 billion, a film whose reputation has improved since its release. I agree with that. And 2018's Riley Pan's Solo, which made it disastrous for the franchise. $393 million. a film whose reputation has not improved since it was released? Well, depending on who you ask. There are a lot of people who still vouch for Solo 2 or a continuation of Solo in some degree. But I will say most people's opinions have stayed the same. Either you love Solo, you hate Solo, or you like Solo. And I like Solo. Both had behind the scenes drama and reshoots that saw their original directors being replaced during filming. Again, not the greatest look, Kathleen. After releasing that was off the cuff. After releasing The Rise of Skywalker, Disney paused making big screen Star Wars movies altogether, but continued to announce new films in development from top creatives. And of course, this goes into Rian Johnson had a trilogy, which never happened. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss were going to do a trilogy, never happened. Patty Jenkins, her Rogue Squadron movie, tanked or was announced, canceled, and now it's back up and running apparently. Colin Trevorrow was supposed to direct a phenomenal Episode 9 script called Duel of the Fates, and I still, in my headcanon, that is the end of the Star Wars saga. Damien Lindelof, who was developing the Rey movie and is no longer. David S. Goyer, apparently, I don't remember that. Josh Trank was supposed to do a Boba Fett movie. Guillermo del Toro was going to do a Jabba the Hutt crime movie. Taika Waititi, God knows what his movie was about, but it's canceled, allegedly. And Marvel chief Kevin Feige, which, that would have been cool. Some of their projects were confidentially announced as movies that were definitely happening until they weren't, and then there are others that were never revealed publicly. This is true. A lot of scoopers revealed those things. And then it talks about how there's still some movies in development. James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi feature film. Sean Levy is working on a movie. Again, Jenkins' Rogue Squadron was resurrected. Lindelof's feature starring Daisy Ridley's Rey has shifted to Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. It's uncertain if any of these will actually get made. And again, we have heard that all these films are on indefinite hold, potentially. The shows. I can bring you in warm, I can bring you in cold. Okay, and they talk about The Mandalorian, which proved live-action Star Wars on TV was possible. It was a big gamble at the time. Favreau also launched the MCU with Iron Man. He deserves to be honored as one of those medal ceremonies on Yavin. Yes, he's a genius. He's a wonderful storyteller, and he's incredibly underrated. Season 3 of The Mandalorian creatively stumbled a bit. Ratings slipped a little, and the show received backlash for the first time. 100%. Season 3 did not go well. Instead of the fourth season, Disney decided to pivot The Mandalorian to launch its first Star Wars feature film since The Rise of Skywalker, coming in 2026. The Mandalorian and Grogu will probably perform well. Yet it also looks like Disney spent many years and untold capital struggling to develop a new Star Wars movie, and its best idea was an extra long episode of a TV show. Okay, we don't know that. I have full confidence that Jon Favreau will turn The Mandalorian and Grogu into a proper movie and not just a extended episode of the show. From The Mandalorian came the Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett, which is where some of the problems with the franchise's TV efforts first emerge. It was clunky. 2 episodes of The Mandalorian were inexplicably sandwiched into the show's 7, and they felt like a band-aid effort to repair the struggling show. The Book of Boba Fett was originally a series, not a miniseries, but it was quickly considered concluded, which is sad to say because I would have loved to have seen continuation if the show had been well received. And they talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi. They talk about Andor, which was a success. They say Obi-Wan is a limited series, and there are no plans for more episodes, which a lot of people want to see more of that. I think they want to see Obi-Wan redeemed, per se, because that show did so badly. Andor is getting a season 2. Ahsoka, the show received positive reviews and somewhat mixed reception from the fans. The premiere ratings were comparable to The Mandalorian. They declined to around 500 million minutes for the first, or whatever. I don't, whatever stats. A second season was announced and is in development. Sources say it will go into production next year, 2025. The Acolyte. The Acolyte received largely positive reviews from critics, which again, as we've said, means virtually nothing. Sparked a raging culture war battle that once again exposed the ugly side of online fandom. Really? The Acolyte's backlash and criticism is difficult to parse, as many fans detailed the creative objections to the show's storytelling and its bold take on Jedi lore. Just because we didn't like it doesn't mean we're racist, basically. What a weird thing to say. And then they followed up with, and some other Acolyte bashers were clearly racist. Yeah, okay, look. Oh my gosh, these people are stupid. This is like, as Ali Beth Stuckey would say, this is toxic empathy. Like, nobody is talking about race. Like, the fact that this is like a diverse cast has nothing to do with the backlash of this film. And look, if there are racist people who don't like this show, it's a small, incredibly small audience, and one that you should not be calling out or bringing any attention to. Creative objections were like the only thing. Like, if this show was phenomenal, no one would care if it was an Asian person playing a Jedi or a black girl playing the leads. No one cares about the race. Nobody. This is just absolutely annoying, because Star Wars fans who love the sequel era, the Disney era of Star Wars, love to claim that everything and everyone is racist if you don't love these movies. And if you don't like the sequel films, you're racist because you don't like Finn, a black man, playing one of the leads. No. The overwhelming consensus is that Finn was one of the coolest characters ever set up in one of the coolest characters set up in the sequel trilogy, and he was horribly underused and underserved. And people, I've talked to people, I've heard rumors that there was a Finn series in development, that people wanted to see him become a Jedi in that show. I'd love that. I don't think John Boyega wants to do it, but I'd love that. I think that'd be so cool to see. Racist. Like, give me a break. There are if anybody is racist, it's a small minority of fans. The vast majority of Star Wars fans are not racist. Ridiculous that they put this in this article. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they go on to talk about The Acolyte being a failure, dropping out of the Nielsen top 10, not getting a season 2. And they lastly conclude with John Watts and Christopher Ford's Skeleton Crew, which could get a season 2 depending on how well the ratings are for the series. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Looking ahead, we have hope. Rebellions are built on hope. I don't know if that line has aged well. At least in the context of when it's used, of how it's used in the film. I just thought it's kind of a forced, cheesy line, but Star Wars is a little corny, so what am I saying? So, that's 6 live-action shows in 5 years. Just one, The Mandalorian, has been an outright hit with critics and fans and has delivered on a multi-season run, which is a traditional model for TV success. Yeah, it's like, it's really weird that they turn these shows haphazardly into mini-series, because the goal should be a multi-season run. And instead of trying to course correct, they just, oh, it's a miniseries. Done. Bye. These people are so afraid. So afraid of taking risks. Hanging over all of this is the increasing suspicion that the company may have wrung out the rag, creatively speaking, on storylines culled from Lucas's original trilogy and his prequels. Even the Acolyte's haters should give the show credit for telling a story that's far removed from the Skywalker saga, as does Skeleton Crew. I don't care about that, and I don't think a lot of fans care about that. Star Wars is the Skywalkers. So stop telling me that we need to get away from the Skywalkers, because I don't agree with that. Star Wars is the Skywalkers. Period. This isn't entirely Disney's fault. Really? They have the keys to the kingdom. It's entirely their fault. And yes, it's their fault that they haven't culled everything from George Lucas's original plans. They have treatments from his original plans for 7, 8, 9 that they threw out because they wanted to do something that was more fan baity. Anyways, this isn't entirely Disney's fault, but it's one of the challenges moving forward. How do you make Star Wars feel fresh and new while still feeling like Star Wars and not like, say, Rebel Moon? The company has enjoyed more consistent results on the animated side. They talk about Filoni with Rebels, Bad Batch, Visions, Tales of the Jedi, critically acclaimed, well-liked by fans. Resistance received about 1/3 of the Nielsen viewerships of Rebels, ended after 2 seasons simply because the story was finished. Whatever you say. Again, never seen Resistance. Don't have any issue with it, but I'd take that with a grain of salt. They talk about Disney Plus subscriptions and how okay, this is where we're getting long-winded. I'm trying to move past some of this. Okay, let's see what they say about Kennedy. Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy, who has produced some of the most beloved and iconic movies in cinema history. How much of a producer actually was she on those films is in question. I genuinely don't know, but it's in question. In addition to successfully relaunching Star Wars in cinemas with The Force Awakens and trailblazing into TV with The Mandalorian, which wouldn't have happened if Jon Favreau hadn't given her the idea, has overseen the Star Wars franchise since 2012. Any mention of Kennedy amid a look at the Star Wars track record cannot be separated from the fact that she has been the target of hateful and ugly fandom attacks because she does not appreciate the fandom. She hates everything fans like, and she is determined to turn the franchise into a platform for social justice themes and feminism. Ugly fandom attacks. She doesn't like the fans. That's the problem. Not the fans. If she was giving the fans what they want and not demonizing them, it would be a much different story, I promise you. South Park also piled on by mockery of her in a recent episode, which a lot of people liked. Still, Kennedy shouldn't be considered immune from criticism, and one thing recent political headlines have shown is that the myth of only I can do it leadership. Okay, so at least they don't say she's immune, that she shouldn't be immune from criticism. That's good, but it definitely under-highlights why she is not being praised by fans and why people do feel the need to attack her. And honestly, like, look, if you're calling her names and you're criticizing her beyond her job, like, I don't do that. That's not what I do. She's not done a good job. Period. She does not like the fans. She does not understand the fans. She refuses to understand the fans. She refuses to give people what they want or learn from her mistakes. She just wants to use this platform to push her message, and that's it. So she is deserving of these fandom attacks because of how she does not appreciate them. If she actually took the time to actually understand where fans were coming from and tried to deliver on things that they want, it'd be a completely different story. But what they did with the Last Jedi, with the Acolyte, with other Star Wars shows and movies that people have not been a fan of, she would have not done those things if she actually cared about the fans and what they want to see. Same with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. She wanted to have a female Indiana Jones demonize Indy for the entire movie. That's what she wanted. and then probably kill him in the end of the movie. Although they probably reshot that ending because it's so tacked on. Parks. I don't know much about the parks. Let's see. Star Wars Land is mostly satisfying. Ranks #1 in guest satisfaction. In 2023, the company's infamous Star Wars Interactive Hotel, Galactic Star Cruiser, cost $1 billion, blew up like Alderaan, shuttering its windowless cabins and blue milk slinging cantinas after 1 year. Yeah, I remember hearing about that. That was a disaster. The stealth goldmine of the franchise remains merchandising. Disney typically doesn't release numbers for individual product lines, but sources say Star Wars merch generated $1 billion for the company last year. Baby Yoda surely has been a retail godsend. That's interesting. I'm not sure if I agree. Well, okay, $1 billion is good, but I feel like billions would be a lot more impressive. Because I've been to Ollie's a handful of times this month, and I can confidently say that there's a lot of Disney Star Wars action figures on the shelves, like racks of Disney Star Wars action figures, and some good ones too. Like there's Bounty Hunter Leia from Return of the Jedi in the archive collection, old Han Solo from The Force Awakens. But I guess if you don't like The Force Awakens, who's going to buy that? The Emperor, an archive collection, Chewbacca, 3PO, Grand Moff Tarkin. So classic characters are sitting on shelves in addition to, I think I recently saw a shipment of Obi-Wan Kenobi figures. So Reva, Obi-Wan, all those characters, Andor characters. And nothing against Andor, because again, I haven't seen the show, but there's stacks of Star Wars toys at Ollie's that are selling for like half price. And now recently Indiana Jones. I saw a couple of Helena Shaws at Ollie's once. Like, merchandise isn't moving all that much. And if it is, it's probably Black Series figures, to be honest with you. I think people still like Star Wars merchandise. I think people still buy the toys. But I don't think it's the new stuff. And I mean, if you think about it, $1 billion is not that impressive of a number when it comes to Star Wars. They do make the point that toys are still the gold mine. Merchandise is still the gold mine. I agree. But $1 billion, they should be making well over $1 billion in merchandise, of all things. This is interesting, talking about the $4 billion investment. During a presentation in March to fight an activist investor, Nelson Peltz, who accused the company of overspending, Disney also revealed that Lucasfilm has generated nearly $12 billion in total revenue on its $4 billion investment. There's so much stuff into this fuzzy umbrella number, however, including non-Star Wars titles and projects and projected future returns, and also so much left out, like the cost of everything. So it's tough to know what to make of that $12 billion, other than Star Wars generates lots of money, which you probably already knew. Yeah, but how much compared to how it used to make? This is clearly Disney trying to fudge the numbers because Bob Iger was very, very close to losing his job. And now he has to prove himself for the rest of the year, or else Nelson Peltz is going to come back with a vengeance. We all know this to be true, especially if you follow the reporting of WDW Pro. You all know that's true. So here's the final answer. At long last, let's get back to the question. Is Disney Star Wars bad? On balance, no. What? What are you talking about? Let's see their reasoning. Disney gave Star Wars fans what they've wanted for decades. That's very debatable, my friend. That's very debatable. A lot more Star Wars from different visionary filmmakers, and some of it has been terrific. Okay, a lot more Star Wars. People just want good Star Wars. I was very critical of them doing one Star Wars movie a year when that came out. I thought that was way too much. Star Wars is great in moderation, but Star Wars all year? I'm sorry, I don't want Star Wars all year. A dormant franchise that once followed a single dynasty, or single dynastic storyline has exploded into a more diverse galaxy of characters and stories. Even often maligned sequel trilogy has sequences within each film that are arguably stunning. For all of its narrative flaws, The Rise of Skywalker's farewell scene between Han Solo and Kylo Ren is as moving as anything from in the canon. This is true. I'll agree with that. I like that scene a lot. It's a very good scene. And the shows like The Mandalorian, Andor, and Rebels clear even the highest bar of hardcore fans might reasonably set. This is true. A lot of the online uproar is a sign audiences are at least still very engaged and care about this franchise, and a true sign of failure would be apathy and disinterest. This is true. I think a lot of fans like me still hold out hope for this franchise to get better, versus people who are fans of, say, Star Trek or Doctor Who, have just been so far moved like they're done. And I'm included in that. Like, I will never watch Doctor Who again as in its current state. Same with Star Trek. Those shows are absolutely done. And I will say, in addition to that, I believe Jon Favreau is fighting. If you believe rumors of that Cameron Pasha puts out there about what Jon Favreau is doing behind the scenes, I do believe Jon Favreau is fighting the good fight behind the scenes to make Star Wars great again. Put that on a hat. But here's another question. Could Disney be better at Star Wars? Clearly, yes. Again, I said earlier that this article takes a somewhat neutral approach to this question, and I think comes to some pretty fair conclusions, I'll be honest. The company's live-action movies and TV efforts on average could and should be better. In 2018, CEO Bob Iger admitted the company made a mistake with Star Wars, making the movies a little too much too fast. After Iger temporarily left the company in 2020, Disney and Lucasfilm arguably made the same error again on the TV side. Lucas famously instructed his actors to be faster, more intense, but that doesn't typically work as a franchise strategy, as Marvel has discovered as well. It's unclear if Star Wars requires more or less, more empire-like corporate oversight or more rebellion-like creative chaos, but it's long seemed like there's somehow too much of both, which has resulted in a master plan that is constantly being rewritten and content that sometimes feels undercooked and clunky. It's not the fault of the fans that they increasingly have a bad feeling about this. Yes, and that's the point I'm trying to make. You can't demonize the fans for being upset with Kathleen Kennedy, who's running the ship. You cannot blame fans for wanting good shows. Not just good Star Wars, just good entertainment, period. That is all that people are asking for. Okay, we're almost finished, so let's power through. Any criticism from the sidelines, however, should be tempered with one final point. Making a successful Star Wars project is really hard. Okay, and this is the overall issue I have with this article sometimes. I feel like this person's trying to field both sides and give this has like leave the billion dollar studio alone vibes to it, and I don't like that because they have the keys to the kingdom. They have no excuses. They've made good movies before. There's no reason why they can't make good movies again. Marvel movies, with their iconic stable of heroes who can be portrayed by different actors, are arguably easier. How? Well, okay. All right. Lucas created this thing and made 6 live-action Star Wars films over several decades, and it's only his first two are widely considered excellent by critics and fans. This is true. The prequels were adored by younger fans. This is also what makes more content so tempting. The original Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back were profoundly amazing and so captivating for generations of fans. Have launched literally thousands of products and generated billions in direct and ancillary revenue. In 1981, Lucas changed the title of his first Star Wars film to A New Hope, and the name is apt. It's literally what fueled the studio executives, creatives, and fans ever since. Each time another Star Wars title opens with a rousing fanfare, a scroll, and a starfield, all of us get that same feeling, a new hope, over and over again. Well, that's it. That's the article. All right, let's wrap this up. So, okay, the issue I have with this article is I feel like it, again, tries to field both sides, reckoning with the fans' dissatisfaction with Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy's mismanagement of the franchise. And again, it has this like leave the billion-dollar studio alone vibes, which I have very little sympathy for a billion-dollar studio who, again, profits off whether we like their content or not. They need to do better. It's as simple as that. They have the keys to the kingdom. There's thousands of creative talents out there. There are good people at Lucasfilm, I believe, who want to make good Star Wars, but there are bad people at the top who care about money and themselves. The root of all evil. So I have very little sympathy for Kathleen Kennedy, who I know needs to get out of the way. And I think there are efforts to make that happen, either force her out or not. Now, I briefly, before we go, I want to talk about Cameron Pasha, because he has been spreading rumors. I don't say that viciously. He's been spreading rumors that Lucasfilm has been on this, that Jon Favreau has been fighting this really hard uphill battle against Kathleen Kennedy to fix Star Wars. And after Luke was introduced in The Mandalorian Season 2, she made his life a lot harder. And that's why quality has dipped, because there is a battle going on for control in Lucasfilm. And according to him, I'm paraphrasing his rumors, but he has a parking space at Lucasfilm. He is developing shows and movies and titles, and he has a plan for the post-Kennedy era. And that's the term that he's been apparently using at the studio to talk to his team. And there are plans to, again, bring Luke back, bring Han, bring Leia, bring Cal Kestis from the video games into live action, unite, have old characters and new characters come together and set up a new era of Star Wars that will continue on for years to come, hopefully for new fans and old fans alike. And I've heard from some people that Cameron Pasha has not been welcomed back on certain internet shows. He's kind of been ostracized by the internet YouTube community for some reason. There are people who take issue with the rumors he spreads. And look, he says to take them with a grain of salt. I don't. I tend to believe him because I think some of the things he said has panned out. I'm not vetting everything, of course. I just don't have the time for that. But it seems like there are things that he's said in the past that are coming true. And I do believe that Kathleen Kennedy is fighting tooth and nail to stay in control. And she's going to lose. She may not be gone today or tomorrow or next week, but she will be gone. And I think it's going to happen soon. And it's people like Cameron Pasha that, and the efforts Jon Favreau has been putting into Star Wars, that give me hope that this franchise could be what it always could be. And I will also mention one other person who has reignited my love for Star Wars, because honestly, there's very little that's keeping me invested, and even making me want to talk about Star Wars, because it's such a painful thing to discuss these days. But I've recently discovered Star Wars Theory on YouTube, and I've watched some of his theory videos. I've watched his fan fictions. I've watched him unboxing lightsabers and talking about Star Wars and the controversies he's been engulfed in. And he makes me excited to be a Star Wars fan again. He has given people like me who have been so fed up with what's been going on a outlet and a path to enjoy Star Wars, even if it's not in the mainstream, even if it's not from Lucasfilm itself. He gives people a reason and an ability to enjoy Star Wars. For that, I'm so thankful he is out there on YouTube, being honest, being generous. He just seems like a very genuine person who just loves Star Wars and wants to share that with people who are like-minded. And I can confidently say that he's got a friend in me, because um, I thank him for giving us an outlet to enjoy Star Wars beyond what's been out there. He gives me hope. A lot of people give me hope. A lot of things about Star Wars in its current form give me hope that we are going to see a look. Maybe not everything is going to be a banger. You know, there are people who are divisive over the prequels, people who are even divisive over the original Star Wars, believe it or not. But I do believe we're going to get to a point where, if Disney continues with more Star Wars projects, and if Jon Favreau is still in charge, there's hope. And that's one thing I agree with the article as well. There's a new hope every time we see a new Star Wars project. And so if we can hold on to that hope, who knows what'll happen. That is a tenet of Star Wars. And I take Luke Skywalker's hope and optimism to heart. It's you know, he's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. My favorite character in Star Wars. He was a role model to me as a kid, and I carry those tenets of hope with me with everything I do, everything I believe. It's the Christian Catholic way to live in infinite hope of what is to come, what could be. And I will continue on that path. Nothing can kill Star Wars. Nothing can kill my hope in Star Wars. Nothing can kill my love for Star Wars. No matter how bad things get, they can always be worse, and things can still get better. And that's the show. Sorry, it went very long today. I'm very sorry this episode was so long, but I hope you guys enjoyed this heartfelt rant of mine on Star Wars. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit the like button, and consider subscribing to this podcast so you can check out more episodes of the Vince Salerno podcast. I'm also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Let me know down below what you guys think of Star Wars, this article, where you're at personally with Star Wars. Who gives you hope? Do other YouTubers like Star Wars Theory give you hope on Star Wars and Cameron Pasha? Or is it something else that you do that makes you a Star Wars fan? Or have you given up completely? You know, I want to hear all your thoughts on everything that we've discussed today. In the meantime, we'll see you guys next time. Have a fantastic day. God bless, and peace out. And may the Force be with you.